The evening air in the apartment was thick with the smell of old paint and damp carpet, the kind of scent that clings to walls after years of rain and worry. Outside, the city hummed, cars honking, distant music from a neighbor's window, the occasional shout from kids playing under flickering streetlights. But inside it was quiet, too quiet. She sat at the small kitchen table, her hands folded tightly in her lap, watching her 3 children eat. The youngest, just 6, slurped broth from a chipped bowl, his eyes bright even though his shirt was 2 sizes too big. The middle one, 9, chewed slowly, carefully saving half his portion for later, though they both knew there wouldn't be a later meal tonight. The oldest, 12, kept glancing at her, his brow furrowed, like he could sense something was off. There wasn't much to eat, just a thin soup made from the last can of beans, a few wilted carrots she'd found at the back of the fridge, and water stretched with a splash of milk to make it look like more. She'd stirred it for a long time, hoping heat and time could turn scarcity into something that felt like enough. It couldn't, but she served it with a smile anyway. She hadn't eaten all day, not since a single slice of stale bread with peanut butter at dawn, before the kids woke up. Her stomach twisted like a wrung-out rag, but she ignored it. Hunger was familiar now, like an old coat she couldn't take off. Some days it was sharp and loud. Other days it just sat there heavy and quiet like a stone in her gut. Today it was quiet. That was worse, because quiet hunger didn't beg. It just waited, and waiting made you weak. She pushed her empty plate away and stood pretending to check the stove. Her legs felt shaky, but she steadied herself on the counter. The apartment was small, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom that leaked when it rained, and a living room that doubled as a study space for the kids. Every corner held something broken or patched, duct-taped lamp cords, a couch with stuffing poking through, curtains held up with safety pins. But it was clean, always clean. She scrubbed floors on her hands and knees after her shifts, even when her back screamed in protest because if nothing else, her children would have dignity. Her job, cleaning offices downtown, used to cover rent and groceries. But last month the company cut hours. Budget adjustments, they called it. She got 2 days a week now instead of 5. The food stamps came late, and when they did, the amount barely bought milk, rice, and eggs for the week. She'd sold her winter coat, then her grandmother's silver locket, then the extra phone she kept just in case. Each sale bought a few more meals, a little more time. She glanced at the calendar on the fridge. Red X's marked every day she'd gone without eating so the kids wouldn't notice. 13 in a row. She didn't count out of pride. She counted because she needed to know how close she was to the edge. Outside, a car backfired. The youngest flinched, then laughed nervously. Sounded like a firework, he said, trying to sound brave. She forced a chuckle. Yeah, buddy. Just a loud car. But inside, her chest tightened. Loud noises always made her tense these days. Every knock on the door could be the landlord. Every phone call could be the school asking about unpaid lunch fees. Every silence from her phone meant no new shifts had come through. After dinner, the kids did their homework at the table while she washed the few dishes by hand. Hot water was another luxury she rationed, so she used cold, her fingers turning red and stiff. She watched them through the steam rising from the sink, her oldest helping the youngest sound out words, the middle one drawing a picture of a dog for Mom in the margin of his math worksheet. Their voices were soft, tired, but still full of that childhood light that hadn't been dimmed yet. Not completely. She dried her hands on her apron, the same one she wore to work, faded and frayed, and sat beside them. You did good today, she said, ruffling the youngest's hair. He grinned, missing a front tooth. Later, after bedtime stories and whispered prayers and tucking each one in with extra blankets, the heater had been acting up again. She stood in the hallway, listening to their breathing, steady, safe. For now. Back in the kitchen, she opened the cupboard, empty except for a half-empty jar of peanut butter and a box of generic cereal with maybe 3 handfuls left. She closed it softly, like it might cry if she slammed it. She sat at the table again, this time alone. The silence pressed in. No TV, she'd canceled that months ago. No music, her phone battery died by noon most days. Just the hum of the fridge and the distant wail of a siren. She thought about calling her sister, but what would she say? I'm hungry again? Her sister was barely getting by herself with 2 kids and a husband out of work. Pride wasn't the only reason she stayed quiet, it was love. She didn't want to add to anyone else's load. Instead, she pulled out a notebook from the drawer. Not for writing. Paper was too precious, but to flip through old grocery lists, job applications, reminders scribbled in the margins. One page had a drawing her youngest made last year. Mommy the hero. She traced the crayon lines with her finger. Her eyes burned, but she didn't cry. Tears cost energy, and she had none to spare. She stood, stretched her aching back, and walked to the window. The street below was dimly lit, shadows pooling between the lampposts. A stray cat darted across the road. Somewhere a baby cried. Life went on, messy and loud and unfair. She thought about tomorrow. Another early bus. Another shift cleaning floors someone else walked on without noticing. Another day of smiling when her stomach growled, of saying I'm not hungry when her body screamed otherwise. But then she thought of her kids' faces at breakfast, the way the youngest always asked for just one more spoon, even when his bowl was empty. How the oldest saved his apple slices for his brother. How the middle one hugged her extra tight before school for luck. That was enough. Not food, not money, but enough to keep going. She turned off the kitchen light and walked to her room, careful not to wake them. The mattress was thin, the blanket thin, but she lay down anyway. Her stomach growled, low and insistent. She placed a hand over it as if she could calm it like a frightened animal. Outside, the city never slept. But in that small apartment, a mother closed her eyes and waited for morning, for a miracle. For just one break in the long line of hard days. And though no one saw her, though no cameras rolled and no headlines would ever mention her name, what she was doing, choosing love over despair, quiet strength over surrender, was one of the bravest things in the world. She drifted off not to dreams of feasts or riches, but to the sound of her children breathing down the hall. And for now, that was the only fullness she needed. The certified letter came on a Tuesday, tucked between a bill for overdue electricity and a flyer for a discount grocery store 3 bus rides away. She almost tossed it with the junk mail. White envelope, official-looking stamp, return address from a law firm she'd never heard of. But something made her pause. Maybe it was the weight of it, heavier than a bill, or maybe it was the way her hands trembled slightly as she turned it over, like her body already knew what her mind refused to believe. She didn't open it right away. Instead, she slipped it into the drawer beneath the kitchen sink, the same drawer that held rubber bands, spare batteries, and the last photo of her mother, faded at the edges from years of being touched, but never displayed. She told herself she'd read it after the kids were asleep, but night came and exhaustion won. She fell into bed with her clothes still on, the letter forgotten under a stack of unpaid notices. 2 days later, another notice appeared, this one taped to her front door. Bold letters, final notice, pay or vacate. Her stomach dropped like a stone. Rent was due in 5 days. She'd been counting on a shift that never came through. She'd called the office 3 times. Each time, the manager said, "We'll call you if something opens up." But nothing opened up. Jobs were vanishing like steam in winter. She sat on the floor of the hallway back against the wall, the eviction notice crumpled in her fist. The kids were at school, thank goodness. She didn't want them to see this. Didn't want them to hear the fear in her voice when she called the landlord again, begging for just 1 more week. He'd sighed, not unkindly but firmly. "I've got my own bills, you know. I can't keep holding space." She hung up and stared at the peeling paint on the ceiling. What would they do? Sleep in the car? There was no car. Stay with a friend? Everyone she knew was stretched thin, couches already full. Shelters? She'd heard stories. Long lines, no privacy, kids separated from parents. She couldn't risk that. Not with them. That night, after tucking the kids in, she finally opened the letter. Her fingers fumbled with the seal. Inside was crisp paper typed in neat black ink. It began, "We regret to inform you of the passing of Mr. Robert Hayes." Her breath caught. Robert Hayes. Her father. She hadn't seen him since she was 12. He'd been loud, sharp-tongued, quick with a raised voice, and slower with kindness. Her mother had left him one rainy night, packed 2 suitcases, and never looked back. They moved across town, changed their number, started over. For years, she wondered if he'd come looking. He never did. And as she grew older, she stopped wondering. Stopped hoping. Stopped even thinking of him as Dad. He was just a man from a life that ended long ago. Now he was gone. The letter went on. Per the terms of his last will and testament, you are named as a potential beneficiary of the Hayes Family Trust. She read that line 3 times. Beneficiary, her? She almost laughed. A dry, broken sound that echoed in the empty living room. What could he possibly leave her? A box of old tools? A broken watch? Bitterness rose in her throat. If he'd cared even a little, he would have reached out, sent a birthday card, asked how she was. But silence had been his language, and now, even in death, it felt like another kind of silence. Cold, formal, distant. She folded the letter carefully and put it back in the envelope. Not out of respect. Out of habit. She didn't throw things away unless they were truly useless. Paper could be reused. Envelopes could hold grocery lists. Even bad news had a practical side. The next morning, she walked to the public library, her sanctuary. It was warm, quiet, and free. The kids did homework at a corner table, while she used a library computer to apply for jobs. Warehouse work, dishwasher, night cleaner, anything. Each application asked for references, availability, salary expectations. She typed flexible, immediate, and left the salary blank. She'd work for food if she had to. While the kids colored quietly beside her, she noticed the librarian watching her. Not in a suspicious way, more like someone who'd seen this story before. The librarian slid a granola bar across the table when no one was looking. For the little one, she whispered, nodding toward the youngest who was half asleep over his math worksheet. She wanted to cry. Not from the hunger, though that was there, but from the kindness. Small, quiet human kindness. She mouthed, "Thank you," and tucked the bar into her pocket for later. Back home that evening, she found another notice slipped under the door. Not from the landlord this time. From the school. Her oldest had missed 3 days of lunch payments. They were asking if she needed assistance. She stared at the paper, shame burning her cheeks. She'd told the school she was working it out, but working it out felt like trying to hold water in her hands. That night, she lay awake again, listening to the hum of the city. The letter from the lawyer sat on the kitchen table now like a ghost she couldn't ignore. Part of her wanted to call the number at the bottom, ask what this trust was, but another part, the louder, prouder part, whispered, "Don't." He didn't care when he was alive. Why would his money care now? Still, the thought lingered. What if... The next day, she took the kids to the park, a patch of grass with one rusty swing set. While they played, she sat on a bench, the letter in her lap. She dialed the number from memory. A woman answered on the second ring, voice calm and professional. "Vasquez and Lowe, how may I help you?" Her throat tightened. I got a letter. About Robert Hayes." There was a pause. "May I have your name, please?" She gave it. The woman's tone softened slightly. "Ah, yes, we've been hoping to speak with you. Would you be available for a brief meeting? No obligation. Just to explain the terms." She almost said no, but then she looked at her kids, laughing as they chased pigeons, their shoes worn thin, their jackets too light for the coming winter. She thought of the eviction notice, the empty cupboard, the way her oldest pretended not to be hungry at school. "Yes," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "I can meet." They agreed on a time next week at a coffee shop near the library. She hung up, heart pounding. Not with hope, not yet, but with something close to it. A tiny crack in the wall she'd built around herself. For the rest of the week, she moved through her days like someone underwater, muffled, slow, waiting for the surface. She took a double shift cleaning a dentist's office, scrubbing floors until her knees ached. She sold her last pair of decent shoes at a secondhand store. She stretched one bag of rice into 4 meals. The day of the meeting, she wore her best outfit, a blouse with only one small stain, hidden by a scarf. She left the kids with a neighbor, promising to be back before dark. At the coffee shop, she sat in the corner, hands folded, watching the door. A woman walked in, mid-40s, sharp blazer, kind eyes. She spotted her immediately and smiled. "You must be her daughter," she said, not unkindly. They talked for an hour. The woman explained that her father had changed in his later years, regretted the past, set up a trust not just with money but with conditions. He wanted to make sure, the lawyer said gently, that whoever received this truly valued family, hard work and resilience. "So we were asked to observe." Quietly, she stared, stunned. "You've been watching me?" "Not in a scary way," the lawyer assured her. "Just verifying. Your job history, your children's school records, community references. You've never asked for handouts. You've always put them first, even when you had nothing. Tears welled up, but she blinked them back. This wasn't about her father's guilt or late redemption. It was about her children's future. Before she left, the lawyer handed her a folder. Read this, think, there's no rush. But know this, you've already passed the hardest part. She walked home in a daze. The sun was setting, painting the sky in soft oranges and pinks. For the first time in months, she didn't feel the weight of tomorrow pressing down. Not because everything was fixed, but because, for once, it might not be impossible. She opened the apartment door to the sound of her kids arguing over a toy. Normal, messy, alive. And for the first time in a long time, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. The bus stop bench was cold, even through her thin jacket. She sat with her kids huddled close, the youngest leaning against her leg, half asleep. The middle one traced patterns in the fogged-up window of the shelter, and the oldest stood a little apart, scanning the street like he was on guard. He'd been doing that more lately, watching strangers, checking door locks twice, asking if they had enough rice before he ate his own portion. At 12, he'd already learned to carry worry like a second backpack. She hadn't slept much the night before. The lawyer's folder sat on the kitchen table, unopened. Not because she didn't want answers, but because hope felt dangerous. Every time she'd let herself believe things might change, life had yanked the rug out from under her. So she'd tucked the folder under a stack of school papers and gone back to what she knew. Work, worry, wait. But today, there was no waiting. Rent was due tomorrow. The landlord had left a note. If I don't see payment by 5 p.m., I start the lockout process. She'd nodded when she read it, like she was agreeing with the weather. Rain falls. Bills pile up. People disappear. It was just how things were. She'd taken an extra shift cleaning a downtown office building starting at 4 a.m. She'd left the kids with a neighbor, promising to be back before school pickup. But the job ran late. Someone had spilled coffee on the carpet, and the manager insisted it be spotless before closing. By the time she clocked out, her feet throbbed, her back ached, and she'd missed the bus that would get her to the school on time. Now, standing at the stop with her kids, who'd walked 10 blocks to meet her because the neighbor had to leave early, she felt the weight of it all pressing down like a hand on her chest. The sky was gray, threatening rain. Her stomach growled, but she ignored it. She hadn't eaten since yesterday's single slice of toast. There just hadn't been time. Or food. She shifted on the bench, trying to ease the cramp in her leg. That's when it happened. A wave of dizziness hit her, sudden and sharp, like the ground had tilted. The streetlights blurred, voices around her muffled as if underwater. She gripped the edge of the bench, but her fingers felt numb. The world tilted again. "Mom?" Her oldest voice sounded far away. She tried to answer, but nothing came out. Her knees buckled. Strong arms caught her before she hit the pavement. She blinked up into the face of a woman, well-dressed, calm, with eyes that held no pity, only concern. "Easy now," the woman said, helping her sit back on the bench. "When's the last time you ate?" She tried to wave her off. "I'm fine, just tired," but her voice cracked, and the kids were staring, wide-eyed, the youngest starting to cry. The woman didn't ask again. She simply opened her purse, pulled out a protein bar and a bottle of water and handed them over. "Eat, slowly." She wanted to refuse. Pride still lived in her bones, but her hands moved on their own. She took a small bite. The taste was almost shocking, sweet, rich, real. She hadn't tasted anything that full in months. As she chewed, the woman introduced herself. Elena. She spoke softly, not drawing attention, just sitting beside her like they'd known each other for years. She asked about the kids, about school, about how the week had been. Normal questions. But there was something in her tone, gentle, knowing, that made her feel seen, not judged. When she finished the bar, color slowly returned to her cheeks. The dizziness faded. She looked at Elena, really looked. "You're the lawyer," she said quietly. Elena nodded. "I've been trying to reach you. You never called back. I didn't know if I could trust it," she admitted, voice low. "Money from him? After all this time?" It felt like a trick. "It's not a trick," Elena said. "But it's not simple either. Your father left instructions. He wanted to make sure whoever inherited his trust wasn't just looking for a handout. but someone who'd fought hard, stayed honest, and kept their family together no matter what. She looked at her kids, her oldest holding his brother's hand, her middle one watching her with quiet worry. "I didn't do it for money," she said. "I did it because they're mine." "I know," Elena said. "That's why you passed." "Passed what?" "The test," Elena said gently. "We didn't spy. We just verified. Your employer confirmed your hours. Your kids' teacher spoke about how you show up to every meeting, even when you're exhausted. Neighbors said you've never asked for help, even when you clearly needed it. You've been living on almost nothing, and still making sure your children feel loved, safe, and fed." Tears pricked her eyes, but she blinked them back. "I haven't been feeding myself," she whispered. "And that's exactly why you qualify," Elena said. "The trust isn't just cash. It's a chance, a home, school support, even funds for you to go back to school, if you still want to become a nurse like you once told your high school counselor." She froze. How did she know that? She hadn't thought about nursing school in over a decade. She'd buried that dream under diapers, rent, and survival. "I kept your file," Elena said, as if reading her mind. "Your father asked me to. He regretted a lot, but he couldn't fix the past, so he tried to build a future for you." She looked down at her hands, rough, cracked, stained with bleach from cleaning floors. Could those hands hold a stethoscope? Could she sit in a classroom again after years of scrubbing toilets and counting beans? "What do I have to do?" she asked. "Nothing you haven't already done," Elena said. "Just say yes," but saying yes felt huge. It meant believing she deserved this, that her children deserved stability, that maybe after all the nights of empty cupboards and silent prayers, something good could actually happen. As they talked, the bus finally arrived. She stood, legs still shaky but steadier now. Elena handed her a card. "Call me tomorrow. We'll go over everything. No rush, but please, eat something tonight. For them." She nodded, throat tight. On the bus ride home, her kids were quiet. The youngest fell asleep on her lap. The middle one leaned his head on her shoulder. Her oldest sat across from her, watching her with those serious eyes. "You okay, Mom?" he asked. She reached across the aisle and squeezed his hand. "Yeah," she said. "I think I am." For the first time in years, it almost felt true. That night, after the kids were asleep, she sat at the kitchen table with the folder Elena had given her weeks ago. She opened it slowly. Inside were documents, property deeds, trust agreements, a letter in shaky handwriting that she knew, deep down, was from him. She didn't read the letter yet, but she traced the signature at the bottom with her finger. Then she looked around her small, worn apartment, the peeling walls, the flickering light, the silence that used to feel like loneliness. Now it felt like the calm before something new. She didn't cry. Not yet, but she let herself imagine it. A kitchen with a full fridge, a bedroom where her kids didn't share one thin blanket, a future where she wasn't just surviving, but becoming. And for the first time, she let herself believe it might be real. The morning started like any other, gray light seeping through thin curtains, the hum of the old fridge kicking on, the soft rustle of her kids getting dressed for school without being asked. She'd made oatmeal with water and a pinch of sugar, stretching one packet into 3 bowls. It wasn't much, but it was warm. And for now, warm was enough. She was washing the last spoon when she heard it, the low rumble of engines, smooth and heavy, not like the usual clatter of delivery trucks or the neighbor's sputtering sedan. She wiped her hands on her apron and walked to the window, pulling back the curtain just enough to peek out. 2 black SUVs, shiny, quiet, expensive, rolled to a stop right in front of her building. They didn't honk, didn't idle loudly, just parked neat and deliberate like they belonged. Her breath caught. Her first thought wasn't hope, it was fear. Black cars meant trouble, police, debt collectors, people who came to take things away. She'd seen it happen to others in the complex. Families dragged out in the middle of the night, belongings tossed on the sidewalk, kids crying in pajamas. Her hands went cold. She turned quickly, scanning the apartment. Was the rent money hidden? Were the kids' school papers in order? Had she missed a court date she didn't know about? But then the doors opened. Out stepped Elena, the lawyer, in a crisp coat, holding a tablet. Behind her came 3 others, a woman with a warm smile and a clipboard, a man in a work shirt with reliable movers stitched on the pocket, and another woman carrying a large grocery bag that looked suspiciously full. No uniforms, no badges. No shouting, just quiet purpose. Elena looked up, spotted her at the window, and gave a small wave. Relief hit her like a wave, so strong her knees nearly buckled. She took a deep breath, smoothed her hair, and opened the door before they even knocked. "Good morning," Elena said, her voice calm as ever. "We brought a few things." The kids, still in their socks and backpacks, hovered behind her, eyes wide. The youngest clutched his stuffed rabbit like a shield. "This is for you," the woman with the grocery bag said gently, stepping forward. She didn't hand it over like charity. She set it on the small table just inside the door like it belonged there. Milk, eggs, bread, fruit, and some things the kids might like. Inside the bag, she saw apples, yogurt cups, peanut butter, even a small box of cereal with a cartoon character on it. The kind her kids had pointed to in stores but never asked for. Then the man with the mover's shirt spoke. "We're here to help you pack if you're ready. The new place is ready for you." Her throat tightened. "New place?" Elena nodded. "Remember the trust. Part of it includes temporary housing while we get everything settled. A 2-bedroom apartment, safe neighborhood, good schools nearby. Utilities included for the first 6 months." She couldn't speak. She just stared at them, at the black cars outside, at the grocery bag that smelled like normal life. Her oldest tugged her sleeve. "Mom, are we moving?" She looked down at him, then at her other two, their faces full of questions but also something else. Hope, fragile as a soap bubble. "Yes," she whispered. "We are." What followed wasn't a whirlwind. It was careful, respectful. The woman with the clipboard, her name was Lila, sat with her at the table and went over everything. Rent covered, school transfers arranged, even a stipend for winter coats and shoes. "No loans," Lila emphasized. "This is yours. No strings." The movers didn't rush. They wrapped her few dishes in paper, packed the kids' drawings carefully into a box labeled "important stuff," and even took the worn-out couch. "We'll replace it," Elena said simply. While they worked, Elena pulled her aside. "There's more," she said quietly. "The trust also includes tuition support for nursing school. Classes start next semester. We've already contacted the college. They've held a spot for you." She pressed a hand to her mouth. All these years she'd tucked that dream away like an old photograph, too precious to look at, too painful to forget. And now it was real again. By midday, the apartment was nearly empty. Boxes lined the hallway. The kids had helped, giggling as they packed their toys, already imagining their new rooms. The youngest kept asking, "Do you think there's a tree outside my window?" Like it was the most magical thing in the world. When it was time to go, she stood in the middle of the empty living room one last time. This place had been hard, cold in winter, hot in summer, full of worry and silence. But it had also been where her kids took their first steps, where they whispered secrets at bedtime, where she'd held them through fevers and nightmares and scraped knees. It wasn't just walls and floors, it was memory. She closed the door softly behind her. Outside, the black SUVs waited. But they didn't feel ominous anymore. They felt like chariots. In the new apartment, clean, bright, with actual curtains and a working heater, the kids ran from room to room, laughing. "My room has a closet. The bathroom doesn't leak. Look, Mom, there's a park right outside." She stood in the kitchen, running her hand over the smooth countertop. No cracks, no sticky spots. A real fridge hummed quietly in the corner, already stocked with groceries the team had brought. Elena handed her a key. "Take your time, settle in. We'll check in next week." As they left, the black cars pulling away as quietly as they'd arrived, she sank into a kitchen chair, one of the new ones, solid and comfortable, and let the tears come. Not tears of sadness, not even tears of joy, tears of release. Like a rope that had been tied tight around her chest for years had finally been cut. That night, for the first time in memory, she ate a full meal with her children, real chicken. Rice, steamed carrots, even a cookie for dessert. No stretching. No pretending. Just eating together under a roof that didn't leak in a home that was theirs. Later, as she tucked the youngest in, he looked up at her with sleepy eyes. "Mom," he whispered, "are we safe now?" She kissed his forehead. "Yes, baby. We're safe." And for the first time, she believed it too. The black cars were gone. But what they left behind wasn't just furniture or food or a new address. It was space to breathe, to heal, to dream again. And in that quiet apartment, filled with the soft sounds of her children sleeping, she finally let herself imagine a future where she wasn't just surviving, but becoming who she was always meant to be. 6 months had passed and the kitchen smelled like coffee, toast, and something sweet. Banana bread maybe, baking in the oven. Sunlight streamed through clean windows, catching dust motes dancing in the air. On the table, open textbooks lay beside a half-finished mug, pages marked with sticky notes and underlined in careful blue ink. Anatomy terms filled the margins: femur, radius, systolic pressure. She sat there, pencil in hand, rereading a paragraph for the 3rd time. Her eyes were tired. She'd been up late studying after her shift, but her mind was clear, focused. For the first time in years, she wasn't thinking about how to stretch $1 or hide hunger behind a smile. She was thinking about blood flow, nerve pathways, how the human body heals. Down the hall, laughter erupted, her youngest practicing a dance move he'd seen on a cartoon, her middle one cheering him on, her oldest pretending to be annoyed but smiling anyway. Normal sounds. Happy sounds. The kind she used to dream about hearing in a home that didn't feel like it might vanish overnight. The new apartment wasn't fancy, just 2 bedrooms. A small yard, a school bus stop right outside, but it was steady. The rent never changed. The lights never flickered off. The fridge was always full, not because someone gave her handouts, but because she worked, and now that work had purpose. Her cleaning job was still there, but only part-time now. The rest of her days belonged to textbooks, labs, and the quiet promise she'd made to herself: I will become a nurse. She still skipped meals sometimes, not because there wasn't food, but because she wanted to save. A pair of ballet slippers for her youngest, who'd shyly asked if he could join the after-school dance class. New cleats for her middle one, who'd made the soccer team. A graphing calculator for her oldest, who was already talking about college. She didn't mind. This kind of hunger felt different. It wasn't the hollow, desperate kind that gnawed at your bones. It was the kind that came from choosing someone else's joy over your own comfort. And that felt like love with legs. One Saturday morning, she took the bus to the other side of town, not to clean offices, but to visit a quiet cemetery tucked behind an old church. She hadn't planned to come, but something in her had been restless all week, like a thread left untied. She walked slowly down the gravel path, past rows of headstones worn by rain and time, until she found it. A simple gray stone with just a name and 2 dates. No grand words. No beloved father, just Robert Hayes, 1942-2023. She stood there for a long time, not angry, not grateful, just present. She remembered the man who'd slammed doors and raised his voice, who'd made her mother cry in the kitchen at night. But she also remembered the letter Elena had finally given her, the one written in shaky script during his last weeks. I was wrong, it said. I thought strength was control. But watching you from afar, how you held your family together with nothing but grit and love, I finally understood what real strength looks like. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I hope this gives your children the chance I failed to give you. She didn't forgive him that day. Maybe she never would. But she left a single white rose on the stone, not for him, but for the version of herself that had survived him. Then she turned and walked back to the bus stop, lighter than when she'd arrived. Back home, her kids were waiting. Her oldest had made grilled cheese sandwiches, slightly burnt but perfect. Her middle one had set the table with mismatched plates they'd picked out together at a thrift store. Her youngest ran to her, holding up a drawing, a woman in a nurse's uniform, stethoscope around her neck, 3 kids hugging her legs. At the top, in wobbly letters, my mom the healer. She hung it on the fridge, right next to her class schedule. That evening, as she reviewed flashcards at the kitchen table, her oldest sat across from her doing his own homework. After a while, he looked up. Do you ever miss the old place? She thought about it. The leaky faucet, the thin walls, the nights she'd lain awake listening for footsteps, afraid of what tomorrow might bring. No, she said softly. I don't miss it, but I'm glad it taught me how strong we really are. He nodded like he understood more than he let on. Then he pushed a cookie toward her. You should eat. You've got a test tomorrow. She smiled and took it. Life wasn't perfect. Bills still came. Some days were harder than others. But the fear was gone. In its place was something quieter, deeper, trust. Trust that she could handle what came next. Trust that her children were safe. Trust that hard work done with love could build something lasting. A few weeks later, she walked into her first clinical rotation at the local hospital. White scrubs crisp, ID badge clipped to her pocket, hands steady. The nurse in charge showed her around. The supply closet, the patient rooms, the break area with a coffee machine that actually worked. As she stood by a window watching the city below, she thought about the woman she'd been just months ago, sitting on a bus stop bench dizzy with hunger, wondering if she'd make it through the week. Now she was here, not because of luck, not because someone rescued her, but because she never stopped showing up, for her kids, for herself, for the quiet belief that better was possible. That night, she came home and found her kids waiting up, even though it was past their bedtime. "How was it?" her youngest asked, rubbing his eyes. "It was good," she said, hugging them all at once. "Really good." Later, as she lay in bed, the house quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of a train, she thought about the black cars that had once scared her. They were long gone, but what they'd brought, the chance, the space, the breath after years of holding it, was still here, woven into every ordinary moment. She didn't need riches. She didn't need grand gestures. She just needed this: a full kitchen, a warm bed, children who felt safe enough to dream, and a future she was building with her own 2 hands. And as she closed her eyes, full in body and heart, she knew this was enough, more than enough. This was everything. After all, the black cars had come and gone. The empty cupboards were full. The children slept soundly in rooms that didn't leak or shake when trucks passed by. She'd started nursing school, her hands now learning to check pulses instead of counting change. Life had settled into something steady, quietly hopeful, gently unfolding. But real life doesn't wrap up in 5 neat chapters. It keeps going, and sometimes the most important moments happen not in the storm, but in the calm after, when you finally have room to breathe. And in that breath you realize who you've become. One rainy Tuesday, she stood in the hospital hallway, clipboard in hand, white scrubs slightly wrinkled from a double shift. She wasn't a student anymore. She'd passed her boards. She was a nurse now, officially, proudly, undeniably. Her badge felt heavier than she expected, not because of the plastic, but because of what it meant: trust, responsibility, a promise to care. She paused outside room 314. Inside, a young woman sat on the edge of the bed, holding a toddler on her lap. The woman's eyes were red-rimmed, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, her clothes worn but clean. She was signing discharge papers, but her hands trembled slightly. Something about her, the way she kept glancing at the door like she expected someone to stop her, the way she tucked the last cracker from her hospital tray into her pocket for later, stirred a memory so deep it ached. She knocked softly and stepped in. "Hi, I'm here to go over your aftercare instructions." The woman nodded, voice quiet. "Thank you." As she explained wound care and medication schedules, she noticed the woman's eyes kept drifting to the snack basket on the counter, filled with granola bars and juice boxes for patients. Not once did she ask for one. Not even when her toddler tugged her sleeve and whispered, "Hungry, Mama." Her chest tightened. After finishing the instructions, she didn't leave right away. Instead, she reached into her bag, the one she always carried with extra pens, hand sanitizer, and now a few protein bars just in case, and pulled out 2. "These are from the staff lounge," she said casually, placing them on the bedside table. "We've got too many. Mind taking them off our hands?" The woman looked up, surprised. Then slowly she smiled, a tired but real smile. "Thank you." "No problem," she said, and meant it. Walking back down the hall, she felt something shift inside her. Not sadness, not pity, recognition. She hadn't just seen that woman. She'd been her, and now she was in a position to be the quiet kindness that once saved her. A granola bar from a librarian, a gentle word from a stranger, the unspoken message, "You're not alone." That night, over dinner, her oldest asked, "Did you help someone today?" She stirred her soup, thinking, "I tried, like how?" "I saw someone who looked like they were carrying a lot, so I made sure they didn't have to carry it alone." He nodded, like that made perfect sense. Later, while folding laundry, She found an old envelope tucked in the pocket of a coat she hadn't worn since last winter. It was the first letter from the lawyer, the one she'd hidden under the sink all those months ago. She almost threw it away, but instead she sat at the kitchen table and reread it. The words hadn't changed, but she had. Back then she'd read it as a test. Did I suffer enough? Was I good enough? Now she saw it differently. It wasn't about proving herself to a man who'd been absent most of her life. It was about honoring the truth of her own journey. The nights she went hungry so her kids wouldn't. The days she walked miles because the bus fare went to medicine. The quiet courage it took to keep loving when everything felt broken. She folded the letter carefully and placed it in a shoebox under her bed. The same box that now held her nursing license, her kids' report cards, and the drawing of Mommy the Healer. Not as a reminder of pain, but as proof you made it. A few weeks later, she got a call from Elena. Not about money or paperwork, just a check-in. How are you really doing? The lawyer asked. Good, she said. Better than good, I'm building something. I knew you would, Elena replied. Your father got one thing right. He saw your strength even from far away. But you lived it every single day. They talked for a while about the kids, about school, about how the new apartment finally felt like home. Before hanging up, Elena said, You know, the trust also allows for community support. If you ever want to help others the way you were helped, it's there. She didn't answer right away, but that night she lay awake thinking. Not about grand gestures, just small ones. A backpack filled with school supplies for a child in need, a meal train for a single parent recovering from surgery, maybe even volunteering at the shelter where she once waited for the bus, dizzy and afraid. Helping wasn't about paying back. It was about paying forward, keeping the chain of kindness unbroken. One Sunday morning, she took her kids to the park near their old apartment, not to revisit pain, but to show them how far they'd come. They sat on the same bench where she'd once collapsed from hunger. Now they shared a picnic, sandwiches, fruit, even cookies. Her youngest pointed to a woman sitting alone on a nearby bench holding a baby looking tired. Should we share our cookies with her? He asked. She looked at him, this child who'd known hunger but still had room in his heart to give, and felt tears well up. Yes, she said. Let's do that. As he walked over, offering a cookie with the shy smile only kids can give, she realized something. The story wasn't just about her survival. It was about what grew from it. Compassion, generosity, the quiet understanding that no one should have to wait hungry while hoping for a miracle. The black cars were long gone, but their ripple remained in full cupboards and steady jobs, in a mother who now had the strength not just to receive help, but to offer it. And maybe, just maybe, in a little boy sharing a cookie with a stranger. The circle was complete. Life wasn't perfect. There were still bills, still hard days, still moments when the old fear whispered, what if it all disappears? But now, she knew the truth. Some things can't be taken away. Dignity, love, the courage to keep going. She packed up the picnic, took her children's hands and walked home, not to a place of lack, but to a home built on resilience, grace, and the quiet, everyday miracle of enough. And in that ordinary walk, under an ordinary sky, she felt something rare and precious, peace. Not because everything was easy, but because she knew, deep in her bones, that she and her children were exactly where they were meant to be, still growing, still giving, still whole.